Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7:30 on this November 13, 2018. We welcome you to the American Fork City Council meeting. We appreciate you being here in attendance. We are working off an amended agenda. That agenda has been posted on the state website and in various places throughout the city as required by state law. And we will follow that agenda. I think I might make a modification to it later on in the meeting, but in general, we will follow that meeting as outlined. We will begin by, I will lead in a Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a prayer by Councilmember Chris Jansen, after which I will conduct the roll call. If everybody would please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Governing ourselves and pray for thy Spirit to be with us, that we may have peaceful discussions, that we may be able to be calm and thoughtful and insightful, that we may take things into consideration appropriately for the best of the community as a whole. We pray for thee to be with us, to be with those who are serving in the armed forces and those who are protecting us in our community and locally, and helping with disasters in our land. We pray for protection to be with them, thy strength to buoy up their spirits, to help them to stay strong. We pray for thee to be with us and guide us this night in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Thank you for that prayer. We'll now conduct the roll call. Councilmember Chris Jansen.
Here.
Councilmember Shelton.
Here.
Councilmember Barnes.
Here.
Councilmember Carroll.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Here.
We have a full body and can conduct the business of the city. Before we get started, I'd like to have all those scouts that are here to fulfill a merit badge requirement. Would you please stand where you're at? If I could just in a special way welcome you guys for being here with your leaders, your fathers, whoever it might be. We hope you learned something tonight, something you can take back and use for your merit badge. We're here to make this city better, and seeing you here makes me feel better. I feel like we have a lot of hope in the future generation of this city. So thank you for being here. We would ask that you sign in the middle of the room if you haven't, because if you need to prove to your counselor that you were at a city council meeting, your name will be in the minutes of the meeting. So thank you for coming. And if I could just offer a little bit of advice, make sure you thank your leaders for bringing you here, taking you on your campouts, putting out the fires when you didn't, things like that, okay? All right, thank you. You may be seated. We'll now move on to the 20-minute public comment period. Anybody that would like to address the mayor, the city council, key staff for any issue that you might have, if you would come forward at the mic at this time, please state your name, and we would love to hear from you. So the mic is open. Seeing none, we will close the public comment period. And we'll move on. We have a special guest with us tonight. I'll introduce his name and his association. And then it is Paul Jerome from the board of Utah Governing Finance Association Organization. If we could invite you to come forward at this moment, Paul. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Mayor and Council, I'm here representing
on behalf of the National GFOA to present 3 different awards or certificates to your city for your finance staff achieving more transparency in governmental reporting. So from talking to Kyle, your finance director, you've achieved the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for 4 straight years now, the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting for 4 years, and the Popular Annual Financial Report, which is the first time you've received this award. So I used to actually go into all the details about what constitutes getting these awards, but it's very boring. And Kyle can attest to the fact that it's boring putting them together, but they are very important documents. So that's what I want to convey to you and to the residents of your city, is that this represents going beyond what is required by a city to make sure that your residents know what their money is being spent on in your city. They're very important documents. The budget presentation is usually the biggest one of the 3. The Popular Annual Financial Report is the smallest. The budget presentation is it basically takes spreadsheets that your staff puts together for your approval as the governing body and makes them more readable and understandable as to exactly what they're being used for. And although it's a very long document, it's very good that your citizens are familiar with it, so they know what's going on in your city and can hold you accountable for that. The Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting is for making sure that your financial statements are in a format that actually makes them usable to make sure that the financial records of your city are transparent. And actually goes beyond that and actually has statistical information, so that residents can see where your city is basically going from here. And fund accounting was always set up to make sure that the financial records of your city were transparent, but it can be very confusing, as it seems like there are about 30 different operations going on and they're all independent of one another, and they really are. And so the financial report actually takes that and makes it a little bit more understandable as to what those are being used for. Popular Annual Financial Report takes that and condenses it down into basically a summary format. And that's the one that I'd encourage your residents to start with, to find out exactly what was spent, and then go to the budget and find out what you're spending on it now. So it does represent quite a time commitment for your staff to do, and again, it's not required. So this is a commitment that your staff has made to the city, to the residents, in wanting to make sure that they know what's being done in your city, and I commend them for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there do you have a plaque of any sort? We want.
There's 3.
Okay. Let's make this official.
Let's just do the one. Do the one?
So basically, once you get the award, it's this plaque is used. You get a basically what we call a button for each year you get this award. And so put them on the wall somewhere so that your residents can see how many times you've done this. So I didn't earn it, so. Congratulations, Kyle. So.
Could I just
Kyle,
add-
how long have you been with the city?
About a year and a half.
So about a year and a half ago, Mayor Hadfield and I and David, we met down at Olive Garden, one of the great restaurants in our city, and we met with Kyle. And I remember coming away thinking, I hope he chooses us. And it's evident that you did, and we're so grateful for that. We appreciate all that you do, and I think we should give Kyle a round of applause. Thank you. And I'm certain that anything you could read that might seem boring with numbers would not be boring to Kyle.
Could I just add something to that? He mentioned that it helps the public understand what's going on. It helps us understand too, so we can make the best decisions possible. So thank you very much.
Okay. We will now move on to the city administrator's report. Mr. Bunker.
Mayor. I just want to congratulate Kyle as well. Kyle does a fantastic job on a daily basis, always keeping us on track with our finances and with the direction the city's heading. And it's really important that we have that vision, and Kyle's done a great job. So, and I just appreciate working with Kyle. I don't know why this is cutting in and out. Okay, I'll just not touch it maybe. We have other great staff members as well, and this last week we had a service project that the members of our staff participated in, and again it was to gather food and other items for Tabitha's Way, and it was a great event, and our staff just really pulled through. We gathered 1,167 pounds of food and items for Tabitha's Way. Last year was about 850. So we topped that number, and just want to thank our city staff for always thinking about our citizens and about the people who need our help, and they do a great job. So I want to just thank all the staff members for that. This Thursday, the Timpanogos Special Service District will be having their board meeting to adopt their final budget. So if anyone's interested in the budget for TSSD, you're welcome to come to a public hearing and a board meeting. It will be Thursday night at 6 o'clock if you're interested in the Timpanogos Special Service District's annual budget meeting. So that's all I have. Thank you.
For you young men that are here, that maybe have lost attention, TSSD, just when you think about flushing your toilet, you think of TSSD, okay? Okay, thanks for that report. Councilmember Christiansen.
The library board is going to be meeting tomorrow, and we're starting training to bring new members up to speed about things that will be going on. So I don't have anything new to report there. And just wanted to commend the city and schools and everybody for the wonderful program for Veterans Day yesterday. It was just marvelous. And it's just touched and moved like I always am when I get the opportunity to go. It's just fantastic.
Thank you for that report. Councilmember Shelton.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to congratulate our community's had a lot of awesome events happen this last week with the marching band and the football, and if you think of all sorts of different extracurricular activities that's taken place, our community is definitely well represented. And I hate to name them because you leave a few out, and you hear about some like being cross country or soccer or whatever it is that they're doing really well. And so it's just great to see these youth be able to represent the city so well in their commitment and dedication. So I wanted to commend them on that. As far as business goes, we had a board meeting for the dispatch center just this last week. Big news there is that the RFP is going out for the service that we're looking to upgrade our systems to have redundancy with the fiber optic cable. One thing that you always worry about going into a special service district is, do you lose control or that customization that you might have if it was just your organization? And one thing that I'm grateful for is the time that the staff took there to reach out to our department, and they built in different add-ons or a la carte that could go into this RFP to meet different organizations' needs. It covers all of Juab County and a good majority of Utah County as well. So we're just grateful to see that. Also attended the New Era board. That is the weird organization that exists. We're really looking at all of the dumps located across the state, how we make sure we provide for that garbage, and they adopted their annual budget. Only big thing that I saw that was controversial in there is compensation of board members, and we decided not to compensate ourselves. So that was all there to report there, man.
We'll be sure to give you a pat on the back.
Oh,
okay?
thanks.
Councilmember Barnes.
Just echo what the other two have said about the community and all the things that take place. I did want to comment just a little bit on the Veterans Day program. It was wonderful, and it always is. And it was also just wonderful to be back where it should be held, and that is in the Tabernacle. That is just such a historic building. Share a little conversation, if I may, I had with my brother yesterday. he mentioned that somebody had mentioned to him that Veterans Day is the single most important holiday there is. And opinion here as a country, we kind of have let that go the wayside. But basically his comment was, without Veterans Day, we would not have any of the other holidays. And if you think about it, it to me makes a lot of sense. And I see some vets, and so I thank each of you personally. It is a big sacrifice, as we all know, but that is the price of freedom. So it was a good program, and I think as a community, we do honor and justice to the vets. And if any of you don't feel so, let me know, and we'll change the program or do whatever we need to do. The other thing in connection with that, Channel 5 had us on both the 6 o'clock and the 10 o'clock news. They were brief little snippets. They weren't very long, but they did recognize us and the things that we do. So that's all I wanted to present.
Thank you for that report. Councilmember Carroll.
Yeah, I thought I would list for you a couple of the things that have happened with the Chamber of Commerce since our last voting meeting. They had their annual board retreat. They had a Connect for Lunch where chamber members can get together and talk. They had a ribbon cutting for Crumble Cookie. They had a presentation of their business of the month. They had a ribbon cutting for Forum Academy. And they had Halloween on Main, where business owners on Long Main Street all get together and do trick-or-treating, and that's a very popular event. They had a tri-chamber lunch. They had a ribbon cutting for Haven Beauty Company and a ribbon cutting for Chip Cookie. And I list these for you, and I was not able to attend every single one of these events, but these are all of their official events. And I just wanted to point out how much hard work they're doing and how they're really trying to boost the businesses that are members of the chamber. And they're working really hard. And along that line, on December 1st at 5:30, they're planning a Santa parade on Main Street. It's 5:30 p.m. where Santa will be on a fire truck with lights on it, driving down Main Street to the library. And I'm sure more details will be coming, but December 1st is not that far away. So that's all I have to report, Mayor.
Thank you for that report. Councilmember Taylor.
I appreciate how we've upped our cookie game in the city with all the new cookie stores that are out there. And they're all, quite large. It makes it difficult to eat a dozen, but I've been able to do it. So, just a couple of things. For years, I have loved going to the Veterans Program, and it's probably one of my favorite. With things like the Fireman's Breakfast and different things. It's probably one of my favorite things in American Fork City that we pay attention to. Not all the cities have, and I went back to my work, my place of employment, and I just mentioned a couple of things to a lot of the people there. And it's, I think sometimes it's unfortunately forgotten what has been sacrificed for us. And I really appreciate what our city does, what our cemetery committee does to make sure that we have a wonderful program every time. And I wondered this year what it would be like without the band there. As many of you may know, the band was coming back from Nationals, I believe they call it, in Indiana. And they were not there, and I thought, I wonder what this would be like without the band playing I believe they call it the Salute to Arms, where each of the armed forces theme songs are played. And it's probably the most touching part, along with the honor roll of anything that's there, where you see these good men and women, some of them struggling to get to their feet to stand while the theme song to the Marines is being played, or they've served or they've had a loved one to serve. And it's a very poignant, a very touching thing, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like without the band there. But the American Fork High School Chamber Choir was there, and they sang, and I thought it was fantastic. It was a different kind of reverence there, and it was very much appreciated. And so I'm very proud of our city for what they're doing that way. And then kudos to our finance and to Kevin. I think I told you this, Kyle,
And David, I know, when I first got back into council here recently, was in all of the years that I have had the opportunity to go over the budget, this is the first year that it's been digestible. It hasn't just been sheets and sheets of spreadsheets, and it had pictures, which for a guy like me is critical. And there were a lot of pictures in it, but it made it when the gentleman talked about transparency, you know, for years we've never had anyone show up for our public hearings regarding our budget. Very few citizens have shown up for that. And with the reports that come out now and the ability to digest that and to go through and read that, I think that's critical, because the world, not just American Fork City, but the world is crying for transparency and for the ability to have an understanding and know those things. And I really appreciate Kyle for what he's done, and David with the staff and all that's gone on that way, because that is a huge critical difference that I think that's made. So kudos to you, and well deserved on those honors. And Mayor, that's all I have.
Thank you for that report. For the mayor's report, you know, what can I say that hasn't already been said concerning the Veterans Day program? Like Councilman Taylor and others, it is definitely one of the things that makes me proud to live in American Fork, proud to live in America. Something that was a little different this year is that the Masters of Ceremony, which is Colonel Franson from our city, he had all those that were veterans of World War II stay, and he wanted a picture of them. And there was probably about seven or eight of them that stayed behind, and we got a picture of all of them. And he gave some incredible statistics of how many are left and how many die each and every day. And these men and these women, they were very proud to be there. And I think, again, kudos to our committee who goes through the work and brings the music together. And the honor roll, if you don't know what that is it's just a silent, reverent moment where everybody that has died in the line of duty that is from American Fork, they name their name and they put a flag up for them. And it's a very reverent moment. And one of those flags is for a member of our council's and his son, and I can't thank him enough and his family and their sacrifice. And so, great event. It was my opportunity this last Saturday as well to meet with and conduct the Mayor Kawakami speech contest. And those that were there to that ceremony on Veterans Day heard the three speeches that won. It's a scholarship speech contest. Mary Kawakami was there. She's 106 years old. She, you know, I was there, and I'm up there as the mayor, and I said, well, I might be the mayor, but I think Mary Kawakami presides over this meeting right here. And she is just very, very active, and she was so supportive to the kids, and it's a great event. And then along with the cookies and the ribbon cuttings, meeting with the American Fork High School band just prior to them leaving to nationals. There's just a lot of wonderful events that happen in our city on a weekly basis, a daily basis. Probably things that I didn't notice before, but we live in a great city and it's very active. So anyway, that's the mayor's report. One thing I'd like to state before we move on to the common consent agenda is that for those present, the council and the public has the ability to receive the information that we receive as we make decisions tonight. And this packet was 746 pages long. It's been in the council's hands. It's been modified just a little bit, some more details as they ask questions. Staff provides details, and we'll want more details tonight, I'm sure. But I just want to make it known that as we act, sometimes that we might act quickly as if we just made the decision, we just learned about it. These are things that we've been contemplating, reading, asking questions for the better part of about 4 to 5 days. And of course, with the TOD, it's been over 3 months in the process of being, of asking questions and vetting that new ordinance out. So I just want to make you aware of that, so you just don't think that we're up here making very quick decisions. There's been a lot of time into this, so. Saying that, I'll move on to the common consent agenda. Rather than announce it, I'll just say as posted on items 1, 2, and 3. Any questions of our staff? Okay, have a motion
Second.
by Councilmember Shelton and a second by Councilmember Taylor on the common consent agenda. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Item number, removal of purchase requests over $25,000. Any questions for Kyle?
Mayor, I move to approve the city payments and the purchase request over $25,000.
Have a motion by Councilmember Carroll
Second.
and a second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 2 is a review and action on the appointment of Katie Bateman for the term ending 2021 to the Beautification Shade Tree Committee. Katie, could you please stand? Katie was at our last work session. We appreciate her willingness to serve in this capacity, and I would entertain a motion to make it official.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the appointment of Katie Bateman to the Beautification Shade Tree Committee with the term ending in 2021.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
I'll second.
seconded by Councilmember Carroll.
And I also want to say thank you for being willing to serve.
I'd make just a few comments there, Mayor. Katie's been serving unofficially for 6 months, maybe even more than that, on the committee, patiently waiting for this appointment to become official. She's been a great enhancement to the committee, and I love her dedication. And I know from my own wife being a busy mother, that can only mean how busy you are as well. And so appreciate your family sacrifice and letting me come to our monthly meetings and participate. So thank you.
We'll make sure we look into that back pay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So now that it's official, make sure you get your raise.
Knowing a little bit about her good husband, she probably has good advice from him as well. He's a landscape architect, I know that. So we kind of get a 2 for 1, really. All right, we have a motion and a second, and I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, item number 3 is a presentation and an acceptance of an audited financial statement for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. We have a representative of Larson and Company, and we'd have Russell Olson come forward at this time and step us through this fine document.
Well, how fun is it that the auditor is here the same day that you got the award from the GFOA? That's all the fun stuff that he got to do. Like, you have some plaques to show for it, but from the auditor, all you're getting from me is a paragraph and an opinion. All the stuff that you got that award for, you referred to it as a little more digestible. That's the digestible stuff of this packet you have. And I get to give you an opinion on the stuff that's not quite as digestible. So when the auditor shows up, this is usually when maybe some of the Boy Scouts figure that they've been here for a sufficient amount of time. It's time to leave. It won't really take that long, so it's okay. So I guess you have this in front of you, perhaps electronically. What I want to do, and instead of going through a whole bunch of numbers, I'm just going to go through the reports that we issue, and maybe just talk about what they mean. But I certainly want to be helpful to you, and if you have any questions about the financial statement portion of the report, my phone number's on the letterhead, so don't hesitate to call me. So if you would like to look at the table of contents, the part that we're involved with more as auditors is really, it starts on page 11, goes to about page 105. So with that, if you'll flip over to, I think it's page 13, this is our audit report. The first paragraph on page 13 basically just states that we audited your financial statements, but the financial statements themselves are yours. They're your responsibility, and our responsibility as the auditor is to issue an opinion on the financial statements. It goes on to talk a little bit about the procedures that we follow to come to a conclusion or our opinion. Oftentimes people have the idea that, you know, when your books are audited, we come in and look at every single transaction that there is, and it's exactly perfect. Well, we would be here all year if we were looking at every transaction. We come in and we take samples, and we look at a few items. We verify with third parties balances in the bank and balances in your for debt, and we obtain what we accountants like to call reasonable assurance that your financial statements are materially correct. So we don't look at every transaction, but we do have procedures that we follow to make sure that we're confident that the financial statements are correct. So that's why we were here. And then the last paragraph on page 13 is our opinion. So this is what you get instead of a plaque from us. You get that, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of American Fork City as of June 30th, 2018. You see how that can be construed as non-digestible? What it means is that you have a clean opinion. The financial statements are materially correct. But accountants have a fun way of putting things, so that's what we say. If you flip the page over, this refers to some parts of this report that aren't necessarily audited, and then it refers to some parts that are audited. And then the last paragraph makes reference to the government auditing standards report that we'll cover here in just a second. So that's the opinion, or that's the audit report, we call it. Between that and page 105 is a whole bunch of financial information that's very good information, but it is in a format that was put together by accountants, and like I say, not quite as digestible as other things, but it's good information. So with that, I believe that the government auditing standards report is at the end. The last two reports, page 132. So anytime that we do an audit for a government entity, we're actually required to look at your internal controls and your compliance. And it's not for the purpose of issuing an opinion on either of those things, but it's for the purpose of helping us decide what procedures we need to follow in order to come to our conclusion. So we look at your internal controls and see what's there, and then adjust our audit work accordingly. So that's just a report that must be issued. There's no opinion there. It communicates that that's what we looked at. The next report, we call it the state compliance report. Governments in the state of Utah are required to follow specific laws, and we looked at each of those items listed in the middle of page 134, the laws associated with those items. We looked at to make sure that the city was following those specific rules, and we found that in all material respects, the city is following those rules. There's an item or two that we'll talk about in the management letter that we don't consider material, but we will discuss it. I guess we'll discuss that now. This letter isn't necessarily bound in the financial statements. We've always called this the management letter. Our friends in the places that make rules call this the communication to those charged with governance. So we call it the management letter. This is where we have a chance to communicate to you as a city council any issues or problems that we had when conducting our audit. If you read through that, you'll find that we didn't have any issues, but this is the format or the mechanism that we would use to communicate that with you officially. If there were any issues, you would probably already know about it, but there weren't any. Following that part of the report is our schedule of findings. Sometimes there's a negative connotation with the word finding. I like to call it an observation, maybe. Maybe I'm not a very good auditor, but it doesn't give me a whole lot of satisfaction to go find where somebody screwed up and publicize it. Like, that's not something that I enjoy. What I do like to do is look at the work that we do, and if there's some improvements that need to be made, to communicate those and to be helpful. So with that, we do have one finding, and it's a state compliance issue, so it's not really, doesn't have a lot to do with the correctness of, or anything to do with the correctness of the financial statements, but it's just in the state of Utah, you're not supposed to have a deficit fund balance. And I'm sure this has been the subject matter of many council meetings, but the broadband fund has a negative fund balance. And according to the letter of the law, that's a finding. And the requirement there is that each year you take steps towards correcting that. And as far as I know, for the fiscal year 2019, those steps have been taken. So at least we're working towards making that not a deficit. So that is the only current year finding. The next page just lists the prior year findings and their status. We didn't have any issues in the general fund, and we didn't have any issues with the budget in our audit of the current fiscal year. So those. Were there any questions on any of that? Any questions otherwise? Okay, well, I guess it's kudos to Kyle Knight, because I appreciate him and how he helped our staff. Like, we understand that nobody likes to be audited. They have a job to do, and we come in, for a week or so and sort of start bugging them for stuff and asking for things, and they're very helpful, and they quickly just gave us what we needed. And anyway, I appreciate him for that, and they do a good job. And I do, when I go to these city council meetings, I always make it a point to thank you as the council members for what you do for your communities. It's great, and you're like referees. It doesn't matter how good you do, somebody's always mad at you. So it takes some thick skin, but I appreciate your service to your community. And again, look up my number and find me if you have any questions at all. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018 audited annual financial statements.
Have a motion by Council Member Taylor,
Second.
second by Council Member Christiansen. Any discussion?
Just real quick, I appreciate Russ. I've known him for quite a while, and he's one of the few accountants that actually has a personality that you can joke about with and laugh with. And so I appreciate that. But his quality of work, as I've always known it professionally, has just been very, very well done. So appreciate him and his company being able to do this for us.
Thank you. Okay. I will call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay. I am going to make a small shift on the agenda. As I looked at this, I thought it all predicates really from number 5. And so I'm going to bring number 5 up to be number 4. And so I'd like to move on to review and action on an ordinance repealing and replacing section 17.4.608 of the American Fork City Development Code regarding the transit-oriented development of the American Fork City Development Code. And I was asked, and I would give the floor up to Council Member Carroll for a statement.
Thank you, Mayor. I first want to acknowledge the Herculean effort that has been to redo the TOD code. It's taken our consultant and our city staff so much extra time, and we've chosen to do this because we feel like it's important to get it right. And at the beginning of the year, we had developers coming to us and saying, this isn't the code that's going to work, it's not going to give you what you want, and we looked at it and we saw there were some ways that it could be improved. So we have come up, we have a new code that we're approving tonight. I have to say personally that I'm immensely satisfied with the code that we have before us. When speaking of TODs, I often hear people mention that this will appeal to people who don't want to take care of a yard. Although there are those people out there, if we only talk about yards, we are missing the point. I think most people would enjoy some private outdoor space, and this code allows that in some places. But the point is that people are willing to trade a yard for the ability to live in a community that has a more urban feel, that has close access to public transportation, where they can walk to shops and services, where there are multiple places for people to gather. We're creating a place that's walkable. By that we mean the traffic is slower, the sidewalks have places to stop and rest. Public transit isn't within walking distance. Buildings are closer to the sidewalk. Parking lots are hidden from view. It's easy to cross a street, and there are frequent quality open spaces that are attractive and useful. If we're going to allow density in our city, it should be done in a way that doesn't just create a giant swath of apartments. This code will require a mixture of neighborhoods, all with different characteristics and feel. Some neighborhoods near the train station will have commercial uses mixed in with housing options. Some farther away will look similar to a suburban neighborhood. But all will have a diversity requirement so that not every area will look the same. I like that the code leads developers through a series of choices to allow them greater autonomy while still creating the forum the city needs for community building. The overhaul we have done represents a significant effort by the city to be thoughtful and deliberate in our planning. My hope is the code will create an area that has a sense of place and vibrancy that is sustainable for many years to come. Mayor, I just wanted to have a formal way of saying that I am supporting what we're doing with this code.
Thank you for those remarks. You know, if I could just summarize this up, I kind of have earlier, but we have been working on this for over 3 months now, 3 months and about 15 days. We appreciate the work of the Planning Commission. This has gone through their purview, and they have approved this as well. They spent about 3.5, 4 hours in one evening, and they really hammered it out. And so And then it came to the council. The council has had great input. I think that in this, and maybe even for us as council, even as staff, and certainly as residents, are we all going to get everything we want? Maybe not. Are we going to come away with something maybe of a compromise? And I think that we have taken as a council and as staff a good methodical approach. We hit the brakes when we needed to, and I think I'm in accord with Council Member Carroll. It's time to pull the brakes off and let this code do its thing, and I'm excited for what can happen down there. And it's going to put a lot of work now back onto staff. We know that people are knocking on the door, and they've been waiting for this moment. So, Council, I'm open to anywhere you want to take this. If you have questions for staff, our consultant is out of town, but I think that we have our own consultant now with Adam. He knows it as good as anybody. So,
Just a couple questions I had. I went back through and appreciate the opportunity to give comments back and things of that nature. A couple things, and maybe I missed it because there's only 750 pages to look at tonight, but and we didn't have kind of a red line copy of what was changed from the last one, so it's sometimes hard to decide what actually changed from the last version. But one thing I think is really important is how the setback is applied and what language we're using inside that setback. And I didn't see it in here, but didn't know if I missed that at all. Anyone help me with that?
I know that that was a point of discussion after the work sessions when we met with Mike, that was going to be anywhere that changes need to be made, those would be made. I think they're all kind of going in and out. At first I thought it was me. But yeah, the setbacks would be basically from, as they always are with any of the property lines, and so we do have those reduced setbacks. We do have the area where I believe some of them, and Scott may be able to better speak to that, where you have the right-of-way and then you have the public easement, and then beyond that, that was basically where the setback would be. So, but that was a point of discussion. We went around internally, back and forth, and I feel that it's been addressed adequately. So.
Well, I guess my question is it in the code?
Yeah, Mike, as far as like pointing out pages, I'd have to look through, but I know that, you know, he took a lot of notes, and we were very thorough in where those needed to be addressed.
So I guess what I'm looking at there is when we looked at that, 4-foot setback, and then we had 8 foot, is that right, on those corridors? And we said, hey, it needed to be hard surfaced or whatever it is. That's the language I'm looking for. So the developer goes through this code, they know what to be able to expect.
And I think what you're referring to a lot, much of that I think is dealt with in the actual standards for the development standards, as far as what the cross section and beyond would look like. But I can let Scott speak to that as well.
Okay.
Sorry, Adam, I didn't mean to jump in there, but Councilman Shelton, your point was actually well taken. Then that was one of the things that we discussed it at length with Mike Hathorn. And again, I can't quote you chapter and verse. I'd need to look at it. But basically, what we had settled on was a clause in there in one of the phrases that basically said, the setbacks, they are what they are elsewhere, unless you're along one of the principal, that's not principal arterials, how do we word it? One of the master plan roads, one of the roads that shows in the master plan. And if your back of your lot is adjacent to one of the master plan roads, you must have a setback in accordance with the approved cross sections. So we didn't specify the number, we just said with the approved cross section. That way, depending on what you're backing up to, you've got it. So I feel confident that in doing that, we were able to get what you were getting at. I know you had asked, do we need to create a special lot number for it? And we thought that would probably be a better way to do it the way I just described. So again, I probably can find the place for you, the exact wording. it might take me a minute, but that was the gist that we made sure got put in.
I think it's great as the developers looking at this and going through it, that it's very clear to them what is allowed in that setback and what type of materials can be used. So for me, it wasn't clear as I read through that,
Okay.
where that was addressed. And that's just the concern that I have, is that's a very unique thing that we don't have in the city that's different in this code section. And I think it'd be very good to have that described. What is that going to be? And from the legal perspective, we've used the word hard surface. And we found out with the trailer court down here, that when we use the word hard surface, that became very hard to define legally. Is that compacted dirt to a certain level? Is it pavers? Is it concrete? And so that's where I think it'd be helpful to kind of know what that is. I'm not saying, hey, let's hold this up because of that, but I think that's a key missing component, because that's right down the center areas and major corridors of what we're looking at. And I think the developer's looking at it right now, so.
Councilman Shelton, can I maybe make a suggestion then? That might be something when we look at the cross sections, and that's one of your other items coming up. You could direct us to, in those cross section details, just put a little more information. I would suggest that would be the best place to put that, is on that detail that as it shows, here's that 4 foot or 8 foot. We can word that as the governing body sees fit to make sure that that's defined clearly. That's my suggestion, where that would be a good place for that.
And I'm going back to the original thing in the work session, where we're trying to take something we've done independent, and we're trying to meld it into our current code, right?
Right.
In our current code, the way it reads is you've got section R1 9000, and you go through there and it says, here's the setbacks, here's what you can do, and you can read through that and it's very clear. What I hate to do is bury something, and I don't think it's intentional, but I think if someone's reading that, they ought to be able to know, okay, if I'm gonna build here, I'm gonna go to this section and read through it, and I think that it would be, for me, just easier to know what all that is right there, as far as setbacks and everything goes. Typically, I'm not going to an engineer's report to look about setbacks on a cross-section when I'm looking at building a building. That's just not how I come to know the code in American form. But just, I think it'd be very easy to put it in there. And again, I'd be happy to approve this contingent upon that coming back and being able to fully describe it. But going back to the comment of transparency, I think it's just very good to be very straightforward in what we're looking to do.
Councilmember Schultz, can I ask you a question? Are you talking only about the setbacks on the roads, not like the house setbacks on?
I'm only talking about, I'm going to call it kind of no man's land. I still have a hard time understanding what we're allowing to be in that 4 foot, is it 4 feet? that we came up with?
It is, and on one of the other one, I believe it's 8 feet. It depends on which road we're talking about.
That's the setback that I have the most concern with. I think the other setbacks have
So
been
I'm
pretty
wondering-
defined on that.
The reason I'm asking is because I think we have a note in here about 200 South that references them, kind of alerts them, hey, there's a special thing on 200 South. I don't know if maybe we want to put that also in for other roads that are master planned.
We could, again, I think maybe it would be appropriate if to have it in the code itself that would reference the standard. My suggestion is still the standard, because as exciting as it is to read the multi-page, really thick code, I do think that probably almost everyone who's going to be developing is going to go straight to those cross sections and look at what kind of roads they need to build. And if it's there written real clearly, that might be a good place. And I'm a big fan of what, if anytime we put in any kind of requirement or anything, that we say it in one place as much as possible. So it's up to you all, of course, but my suggestion would be is maybe put it in the code to reference something like what you put in that 4 foot area shall be in accordance with standard detail number and then in standard detail, then they could list here's what's allowed, here's what's not allowed, real briefly and succinctly. Again, merely a suggestion to you what you'd like to do.
I like that suggestion, because you're still warning them that there's something here, but it's where they can find it. whatever.
And I guess for me, it's clarity. So whether we describe it, I think it's a better or best situation. In my mind, everything about setbacks is already in this code. And then we just pull out this one section that's very unique and we put it in engineering standard to say, why are we doing that? If everything else is contained in there, why don't we follow the same pattern that we're still following with the other setbacks in here? But not with the rest of the code. So for me, it's just a better or best. But either way, I think it's very important that we describe what that is, so we don't end up with some kind of situation down the road where it's up to interpretation. We don't have legal standing to stand on because we end up with something we didn't intend.
And whatever the collective body would like to do, of course, we'll support. The only request I would really try to strongly make is whatever we say, let's say it in one place and one place only, though.
I agree with you 100% on that.
It also makes it work better if you make adjustments later on, so you don't say one thing in one place and then not change it.
And then the other comment I had, we can talk about that one, more resolution when I come to it, but the only other comment I had too, and that again is noting that back into the existing code, is just, let's see, it was on page, so we go into the graph area about who does what and who approves what. I think that was page 7. Let's see if I can scroll to it here real quick. 6, I apologize, page 6. Again, at the top there, we have the review authority roles, and the city council is the final decision-making body. Planning commission would be a final decision-making body, and then we have the word staff there. And I brought this up before, but I really feel like we have to describe who is staff. I think that, again, that would be the zoning administrator, or however we want to word that to be. That way it's just not arbitrary of who's doing what. And when we look at it, those are approval type things that they're doing. The other thing that I got a little worried about as we look down further in the document, page 8, I believe it is. Let's see here. Do a search and find it. I tried highlighting it. Where it states basically that the approval is either going to be the planning director, and it uses the word and/or the public works director with the, what's the right word for the C, in cooperation with other staff. And that's named throughout the document. I brought that up last time. I think that we need to have one person that's over approvals that that's going to. Either the planning director or the public works, but when you put and or in there, that can be somewhat confusing. I think it was page 28 there, Ben Lillian, if you pull that up just real quick, if people take a look at it, there's a sample there on that one. I think it's 5.0, I'm off memory here now, it's just bad, but let's see. Yeah, if you take a look, it's on number 3 on that page 28, where it uses that. And it, like I said, it's throughout the document where you see in that second line there on number 3, where preliminary and final block plans are subject to the approval by the planning director and or public works director in consultation with city staff. Again, I think that just needs to be one person who's doing the approval on these. I think you leave the word in consultation with city staff. That way, if the public works director or the director of planning has comments, they can connect with each other, but I think it's to one person to make those approvals. And in the current code, we say that's the zoning administrator, and that's why I think that would be the same language. Again, kind of going back to what you said, Scott, before, one place. This is just kind of melding this outside document into our current code, where Adam's already doing all those approvals. I think it makes sense to make that him in connection with city staff.
You know what? So I'm going to put staff on just maybe the hot seat a little bit. I'm okay with having a couple different people. We have the people that know it best, and there is an and/or. I've always been comfortable with the way that you work together, and to come up with the right solutions. Are you comfortable with the way that it's worded? The fact that you two can work it out and give the right answers to the appropriate people? Do you see any confusion from this as a staff?
Personally speaking, I don't. I mean, I understand and respect where you're coming from, but I know that, at least I feel that I'm comfortable with the way it's worded now because I do work very closely with Scott, and there are things that I think as we dive into the details, I'm going to be leaning heavily on him, and then there's other areas that he will be leaning heavily on me. And if it's something that we need both of our signatures on the form, that can easily be done. But I'm comfortable with the way it's prepared, and I'm ready to move forward with that, and I think it will be okay. So.
And I hope my comments didn't come across as accusatory.
No,
don't
no.
have a good working
No.
relationship. It's really coming off of past experience. Serving on the Board of Adjustments for 9 years, this came up quite a bit about who was doing what when and who had the authority to approve what, and there was finger pointing. With the staff we have now, I don't think so, but we got to look at this code beyond the current positions that they're in. And we throw the word and or in there. If it's just and, then Adam, you're right, both need to sign it. But when you put the word and or in lot plan approvals, public space approvals, who does it really go to? And I think we should have to say, here's the point person, and if you're gonna lean heavy on him, that's great, because we have that verbiage in consultation with staff. Because here's gonna be the next item that you have, is the code for the Board of Adjustment states in section 17 that if there is an appeal, it's to an administrative decision that's been made. So when can they make that appeal? And this maybe comes back to the legal question of how does that hierarchy work and what the appeal system goes. It's nice to know who you're working with, so if that person that has the final decision you disagree with, you know that you got your decision from there and there's a clock that starts. And I believe it's 90 days that you have to file an appeal with the Board of Adjustments. I just think the clarity that we would provide there would be extremely important, keeping it in connection with our other ordinances we have. Again, is it something that's going to be detrimental and the world's going to fall apart if it doesn't happen? No. But I think just from a customer service side of things, I want to know who the final decision maker is.
I think, I like where Rob's going with this because we are very fortunate to have the situation that we do right now with the two of you. But as we're all experienced with, things in the city tends to change, and unfortunately sometimes they get territorial and with different things. And we're very fortunate, again, that's not our current situation. But going forward, I tend to agree with Rob in terms of if we were to take this and maybe change the same terminology of zoning administrator, if everyone was comfortable with that, we still have it in consultation. It would be a simple change, and it, again, would reflect back to that older document that we currently have. I mean, would that be something that will that be difficult to do? Would that cause a problem? Because as long as everything is status quo as it is now, we have no issue. But this is a document that's going to remain. That's why we've taken so much time to put that together. Do you think would that be detrimental to make that change to zoning administrator? And
I don't feel that would be detrimental. It's an easy change. I mean, that's something that can be done.
Rob, would that satisfy your?
I would, and I don't want to say that I have the expertise to say that everywhere it's worded there it needs to be Adam, because maybe it needs to be the public works director if it's involving streets. So I'm happy with that. That was a request I made in the last work session. If we could divvy that up a little bit and say, okay, this is where it makes sense for the public works director to make that approval. Cross sections, engineering. I don't know if Adam wants to be the one giving the approvals on that.
And Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I think that was a lot of thought. And just, I'm good with how it's worded. I don't really have strong feelings if you feel collectively that it should be worded otherwise. But just so you know, the thought behind the current wording was that there are some issues throughout this document that are clearly going to be really more in my court to answer. There's other questions or issues that are clearly going to be more in Adam's court to answer. So if you make it a little more general, then it's clear that we work together. That's the or part. And then there's somewhere maybe it's clearly both of us, so it would be and. So that was the thought behind it. However you feel is best to word. Of course, we don't see any problems with it. And I will say, just on a personal level, Adam and I are great. He is actually one of my top 5 favorite planners at the city right now. So we're good.
Well, I agree. I think it's important to make this, transparent to the public, to the developers who are coming in, who don't understand this situation. They don't know who to turn to. I mean, they're not all as professional as some of the ones that we've met with. And it can be confusing. So we need to make it as easy to understand and straightforward as possible. So I go for both of you to specify who's in charge of what area.
And, I look at it, I'm not trying to hold this up any more than it already has been held up. So again, if it's a matter of a contingency, or the back for ratification, you know what I mean? And just say, hey, let's give the assignment to Adam and Scott to go back and say, okay, who is it here? And if it's an and here, we'll put the and in here. And
That's what I was going to point out, is because this straddles both of our worlds, if you will, I think in many cases it will be an and instead of one.
Yeah, I think
so.
And there's not a lot of difference in what you're doing already. When you go back and read that section of the zoning ordinance officer, I keep calling zoning administrator, I can get the terminology wrong, but it all rests upon your shoulders, Adam, as far as getting out those permits. I can see where the engineering standards come into play, but if we try to say, here's what we already have in our code, how do we get this to fit into it? Maybe using that definition a little bit to say, where does that line fall?
So would you be okay if some of them were and?
I would be, but I hope it wouldn't be every single one of them. I think when we add an and in there, that's just, and I'm all about simplicity. How do we make this simple? Because our city's going to continue to get busier. We took the planning department and halved you guys, 4 or 5 years ago? And now they're dealing with more work with half the staff that they already have. So the more we can make it simple and streamlined, and it says in consultation with other staff, I'm happy with it. And then if someone has a burr up their saddle that, hey, you approved something without consulting me, that's where the mayor gets paid the big bucks, and the city administrator get involved and say, okay, what's wrong with our processes? But
Well, see, because I'm worried about like something if it's given to, say, Adam, but it has a strong technical component still, and if it wasn't them, it was some other people, that person would have the ability to take it and run with it, even though they didn't have the technical person look at it because it was specified for them. So it does go both ways, kind of. It can be used as a crutch on that end too.
yeah, and I'm sorry.
Well,
Go ahead.
don't you think on those, though, we would have the and? I mean, is that one of those ones where we would have
Yeah.
both? I mean, it's going to take some extra work to go back through and do this, but it shouldn't be terrible. Rob, why don't you take a shot at a motion on this then?
Are we ready for that?
I was just,
Is there any other comments?
I was just going to make one comment basically on the same thing. The fact, if it says and or, it sounds like it's at the developer's discretion instead of our discretion who does it. We should be plain.
I have to yield to grammarian on this one.
Was there any other concerns anyone had before I take Clark's advice and take a stab at this thing? Okay, then let me get back up here. I'm on page 544, unless someone has the motion that's suggested. Okay, so I'll move to approve the ordinance repealing and replacing section 17.4.606 of the American Fork City Development. 708, thank you. 608. Woo! Of the American Fork City Development Code regarding transit-oriented developments of the American Fork City Code contingent to replacing on page 7 at the top of the graph there where it says staff, to put that to be the official language of the zoning, what's the right language that I'm looking for?
Zoning administrator.
Zoning clearance officer, I think, is the right language. And subject to going back and having staff defining who's responsible for what between the planning director and the public works director bringing that back to the council for ratification and clarification in the code as to the setbacks in regards to the 4 feet that we have discussed on the major arterial cross sections and the 8 foot thoroughfares, whatever the right language is. How's that, Clark? Did that
Hey,
sound like a good butcher motion there?
no, I think we've got it. I think we've got it. I will second that motion, Mayor.
All right. We have a,
I don't really like having like wordy motions that we have to approve. It muddies the water a lot.
You know,
But it
in
comes
order
down to
to-
two elements, though, that we're changing, and that is the terminology on page 5, and then the delineation of approval power, if you will, on those items where they can be one and not the other, and vice versa, and then those that we will have both. And Adam, said we could do that. So yeah, I agree. The motion is wordy, and I hate to call out Councilman Shelton on that.
I'm a wordy guy.
But I think the end result is what's critical. So if it does, do we understand that? Do we need to bring clarity to the motion on the clarity inside of the document that we're seeking? From the Department of Redundancy Department.
The only question I have is on that page, was it 7? In that first column that says staff, you were saying you wanted it to say something like zone clearance officer, but in some of the later references, it may not be the zone clearance officer, it may be the public works director, or are you saying the zone clearance officer as defined in the further sections of the code? Because in other areas, we have said, the chief building official is the zone clearance officer for this particular item, but
I think our code says that it is the planning director. That's very clear in our code, right?
and maybe I'm getting terminology mixed up. I'm just saying, like, in that first column, if you want it to say zone clearance officer, but if it's something that the public works director is going to approve in later sections, do you want something more broad, staff as defined in later sections, or something like that? Just so it.
Fine for me, because
So.
the ultimate determination is going to come where we have delineation
Sure.
between the two.
And
I
if we,
would,
Okay.
what you said, have the staff constituted.
As defined in
As defined.
those sections or something, we can
I'll amend the
figure
motion to
that out.
include that provision.
I was just going to
Laura,
say,
you have feelings over there.
I think got it.
Okay.
I think I got it.
we can either have a wordy motion tonight, or we could postpone this and come back with it changed. So to move things along.
Yeah, I think just a side note, where I would say my growing up years in city government was on the Board of Adjustments, and for 9 years, we never had a suggested motion. It was always who off the top of their head can come up with whatever there was, and so that was very interesting to have to do that. So I'll admit I've lost my skills since converting here to the city council and being able to just look at a suggested motion and take that for granted. So thank you for your patience.
okay. Is everybody clear on this motion? You got it?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna be annoying. So you're suggesting the change into the table header, as well as pointing to a person in each of the sections, right? And then the other thing was the setbacks. You wanted some sort of, on that one, I think that we should use the same verbiage that's on, I couldn't find it, but I know there was something about 200 South, and I would recommend that we use the same verbiage so that it keeps it easy.
And part of the motion, I hope that's included in there, Lori, that we got was to bring that back to the council for ratification. So it's not a final decision. This is what, they're going to make the changes and then bring it back to us, and we're going to make sure that it's cleared up to our satisfaction as a
Well, and then I'm wondering if then we change the motion to just say something more general, like, hey, to redo the city staffing requirements or whatever.
I guess to me, it's 6 is one way, half dozen the other. I'm just saying, I think we need to come back and say who's doing what by when, and that's the most important thing to me.
Well,
So
as
it's
we,
not like
as we,
this.
as we, as we talk about the changes I would like to put this and set this cell tonight. I think that kind of leaves us still a little bit stuck in the mud. Can we clarify it enough and give enough direction contingent on this that we can say this is launched and this is ready to go?
I can, Mayor. I trust with what we've got in the notes and the motion. I think we can. I feel like we can. I don't want to put it off another 2 weeks.
Well, just real quick, in section 3.044, so that's on page, what do I say, that's on page 10. It talks about the 200 South setback. It's properties adjacent to 200 South must meet the requirements of 200 South design and construction plans document as generated by American Fork City. We do the same thing with the other thoroughfares, and I think what we could do here is add not just 200 South, but all major thoroughfares included, in that section 3.044, and that would clarify the setback issue.
Well, let me just clarify what my issue is with the setback issue. It's that it doesn't say exactly what can be done in that setback. So we can put whatever verbiage we want here, but it's got to reference somewhere what we're allowing in that 4-foot setback.
In other words, what is a hard surface?
Well, if that's the term we're looking to use, or we're looking for landscaping, or a combination of both, or what are we allowing in that 4-foot area?
And I'm okay with the verbiage as it is because it does reference them and it alerts them to this construction plans document.
Right, so when I look at a construction plan for a thoroughfare, I'm looking at what the city owns. We don't put this in private property area, and I'm not looking at a thoroughfare usually for setbacks. At least that's not how our current code works. So to me, if I was a developer coming in here and I didn't read this specific section because I went to the setback section, like all the rest of our code is written, I'm going to feel like you hid it from me. Now, I don't think that's intentional. I just think if we have a system in place with every other code that we've listed it out, what the setbacks are and what's expected on setbacks, why not do we do it here?
But there's only those setbacks for the certain roads, not for the general code, so it wouldn't fit in say the lot plan area or whatever the code. It would have to be in a different area but this actual code.
However it works, I just think transparency is most important. So the way to keep it simple and keep it as top of mind that people don't have to go digging for it. Are we going to put this construction plan document on our website so people can review it and look at it and research it? I sure hope so, but I hope it's updated more often than we do with our impact fee document that we put online. That when I went to build my house, I used and found out it was 10 years old, and I ended up being $5,000 short because I did the research. When I called city staff, guess what they told me? All the information's online, go look at it. Now that's different staff there now, but I just think we just need to have clarity and transparency. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think the most important thing is we define it. So wherever it's defined, let's define it. But I don't want to just add verbiage here and say it's done, because we still have to define it in whatever document we have.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add in here just an opinion on something. I think there are two separate issues that we're talking about and kind of mixing up a little bit. They're very related. See, it's doing it too. I don't know, it's contagious. They're very related to each other, these two separate issues, but what I'm seeing is one issue is defining, as you're saying, Councilman Shelton, what can go in that 4-foot setback. And my suggestion earlier was let's put it in the standard detail. Whether you put it here or the standard detail, it's up to you, on which suggestion you want to follow. To me, the other separate, it's related issue is kind of what I was talking about a little earlier, where it's talking about the lot types. And it's going in and saying, so if you have lot type whatever, and we said it elsewhere, I hope we can find it here in a little bit, where if you have a lot that backs up to one of these thoroughfares that is not built by the city, and as you see, that one right there is referring to 200 South, which is to be designed by the city, as says construction plans as generated by the city. But we also have the standard details for 900 West, 700 West. Those also have setbacks that will mean that, let's say you have an L6 lot, an L6 lot in the interior is not going to have the same setback than an L6 lot facing or adjacent to one of those roads I just named is. And we said that elsewhere, and again, I'm hoping we can find it, just simply making people aware that there is a different setback for your lot type. So that's one issue. Again, the other issue is what can go in that. Just want to make sure we understand those kind of, I think, two separate issues.
I don't know if we're going to be able to resolve that tonight, 'cause I think staff really ought to go back, take time to think about it, put it in there to me, and this is going to be something that's going to be in there for who knows how long, till the council decides to change it, but with the motion, hopefully we can move forward, give the staff time, hopefully within 2 weeks we can come back with something that we can actually see, look at, know how it interacts with the code. So that's why I feel like the current motion accomplishes being able to move this forward, but still allow for a couple of cleanup items that are still out there.
You know, I'm gonna put somebody on the spot. You can take it out on me later. Mike, would you come forward? You've been listening to this. You've been very vested in this. You've been waiting for 3 months and 14 days or 13 days. What do you think about what we're talking about and some of these setback
I hear
issues?
the comment, and that there's some concern that this code is different, and it sounds like the concern is that a developer is going to come in and not understand the setbacks. This form-based code is totally different than what you're going to see in most cities. I mean, there's a few cities that have form-based code, so this is a way different process. We're going to go and look at this lot type, this roadway, this is the permitted use. So it's a kind of an apples and orange. The developer's not going to think that he can just go to a setback section in a form-based code. And if we have questions as a developer for the last year and a half as we've been working with staff, they've been really good to clarify. We designed the project a couple times because there were questions with the TOD zone, and staff has been good to answer those questions. So based on what I've seen so far on what your motion is to approve, if you approve it the way it is, you might need to tweak it with a text amendment here or there. No code is going to be perfect, but I think you're close enough where you could approve it, and then if in the future it does have an issue where a developer can't figure out the setbacks, I don't think that's the case. If it is, we're going to call Adam or engineering, Scott, and get that clarified.
Well, my big worry here, Mike, is that if you're building right now and you know you got a 4-foot setback,
Mm-hmm.
and you go, okay, I got a 4-foot setback, I need to know what I can do in that 4-foot setback. And you call Adam, and you get an answer. My worry is it's nowhere in the code that says what can go in that 4-foot setback. And so that's the concern that I have right now, is that we need to define what can go, and then there's an 8-foot setback in other areas, right? So.
Such as hardscape, concrete.
Right.
Whatever.
And we've talked about a lot of different things as a council. To be honest with you, I don't even know if any of us have the exact clarity of what we're going to allow in that area. And that's why I think that, yeah, let's go ahead and pass it now. I think we're so close. Let's take 2 weeks to come back with some language and say, here's what you can do in that area to add more clarity. So when Adam called, you call Adam and he said, you bet. And if you want to know where it's at, here's where you can be able to find exactly what is allowed.
Mm-hmm.
But my worry right now is it's up to staff's interpretation, whatever our discussions have been, which I think is very dangerous.
So in your example, Willow Glen, if I was to call Adam and say, hey, what can I put in that setback? What would your answer be? I mean, it's a hypothetical question. Is it concrete? Is that an engineering question? Probably not a.
Probably more of an engineering, unless you want to. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what I just brought up the cross sections, which just to look at, which is in the next item, but where we have it written right now, it reads exactly, it says building setback, parentheses, hardscape. I would, this is why I would suggest if there's confusion and not sure, then maybe on the next item, I would suggest again, let's have you direct me to be more specific, what that would mean. And let's put it right there where it says hardscape. I would suggest, let's put it there, concrete, paver stones, whatever, but I really think that's the right place.
Saying make a definition of what a hardscape.
What hardscape means, and put it right here on the standard detail.
I think you've made a very good point, but the question would be is if somebody thinks they know what it means and doesn't ask questions, you go ahead and invest
So
in
if
something.
hardscape is a defined term, hardscape is concrete, asphalt, then we'd know, right? I mean, hardscape, as you pointed out, is that Packard Road base? So hardscape was a defined term.
I
Hardscape
hate to even
is-
bring up the word permeable concrete,
Yeah.
right?
We've been dealing with
Well,
that
we
for-
do say in there that there's no permeable
I
concrete,
know,
so.
I'm just throwing that out there.
That was good though.
Would you put it there, or would you put it in the definitions in the back? Is there a glossary of definitions?
And that's maybe not a
Then you
bad
don't
place
have to
either.
figure out which sections it in. You just use that word and it's back here.
That's another good valid
That was a question.
suggestion. That's,
Wasn't a suggestion.
no, it's a good, I'll take it as, your word is my command. So I'll take that as a very good suggestion, actually. Again, it's up to you all.
I think it needs to be right up front. I think it needs to be right there. And we determine what that is and where that exists, as long as it exists.
I think we can come up with that tonight, what a hardscape is. I don't think we need to come back in 2 weeks and pass what a hardscape is. To me, hardscape, so it can be concrete, it could be pavers. I don't think personally, I mean, hardscape is asphalt, but do we want to see asphalt up against? No, we don't. But we don't want compactable material. And of course, our code does not allow that anymore, but it did in the past. We changed that. Can you think of any other hardscapes that could be?
So do you want to use the
My
term
thick skull.
hardscape? I mean, I don't know that you really want to use the term hardscape. You mean,
Concrete and paver, concrete or pavers.
or define the term in setback areas, these are the permitted materials. Because hardscapes, I mean, asphalt really is a hardscape.
It is.
Good point. So in your setback areas, these are the permitted materials.
I just don't know the downside to coming back in 2 weeks. I really don't. It allows developers to move forward. You come back, you have staff time to be able to collaborate on it, perhaps get with our consultants, come up with the right language. Because what I hate to do is have something and then we forget about it because we're just sitting here trying to, this is not the time to be making sausage. This is the time to say, is the sausage look good or not? Does that make sense? Let's let the sausage makers go back and continue to refine that sausage on that part.
How does that work with a non-city council developers? You just said that you could approve a motion to lift the moratorium, if I heard you correctly, but still give staff 2 weeks to come back and make changes to recommend changes to city council. So as a developer, if I want to start building Willow Glen Monday,
You can't.
No, yeah, he's
No,
saying pass it
But
with
that's
a
what I'm saying.
contingency that we would have to come back and look at it, but it would still be taken effect as a valid code, the way it's written, the way we passed it.
So let me ask you this, do you have an application in with the city right now? For Willow Glen?
it's preliminary approval. We just got approval from
You do, but that's not under this
That's
code,
under-
that's
that's
under
under
the
the
previous
old
code.
code.
So I know
I think it's gonna take,
coming.
I think it's gonna take you longer than 2 weeks to be able to get the approval anyway, you know what I mean? If we lift the moratorium tonight, and again, I'm not trying to hold up the process, I just wanna make sure we have clarity, and again, this is where it comes into, I don't want developers coming in, all of a sudden, we've got pavers, concrete, asphalt.
So
You
an
know what I mean?
example is, we've got the ground under contract. Part of our contract is we don't close until this is passed, and then we have so much time after this is passed to close.
Right.
So your point is valid. We don't have an application in, but we have legal contracts that are being held up because this isn't closed.
Well, and I see it being closed tonight with that motion, right? And then
If I
we
could
come
just-
back and.
If I could just add one
let's,
thing, I don't know all the developers that are waiting, but I do know that there's been contact with several developers who have been working on their plans consistent with the code and have been kind of making tweaks along the way so that as soon as the moratorium is lifted, they can move forward. Can they put an application in within 2 weeks? I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me to see an application within 2 weeks. And the second that application is submitted, they're vested in whatever code it is in force at the time. So if we're going to make any type of changes, if we're going to say hardscape, even if you're looking at kind of changing that to a certain degree in 2 weeks, you probably want to pull back and define it a little bit more today. And it can always be changed in 2 weeks again. Same with zone clearance officer. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not that's the appropriate term. Perhaps tonight it's zone clearance officer or his designated representative. And that allows Adam kind of a little bit more leeway in this next 2 week period. If that's the approach you're going to take, he can kind of point fingers and put the building official in charge of some things, have Scott in charge of other things. It's kind of at Adam's desire at that point. And then in 2 weeks, we could come back and revise it and ratify whatever changes the two of them are able to make.
So Sherilyn, on that point, section 17.2.402, I think clarifies exactly what you just brought up as far as the zone clearance officer and his designee. And it goes through and it already has that language. So I think that, again, like Scott said before, let's say it once in the code one place, and then it would fall back to this to say what are the zone clearance officer's duty, and it references his designated representative, right? So I think that helps solidify in my mind that he can assign that out, right? The approval process, if need be. I guess I don't really see the approvals coming in right off the bat. Now, just because they put in an application, are they vested?
Yes.
Absolutely. So approving this tonight, and then we come back and change it in 2 weeks, we're under the same conditions that we were under the current motion. I don't see any difference in that. They're still vested if they put the application in right away versus, you see what I'm getting at?
I do. Just with some of the discussion that's taken place, especially with this hard surface discussion, I would tend to agree with the mayor of having some definition tonight, even if it's not the one that's going to be at the end of the day. But if you want to pull back and not have asphalt as being your hard surface, and you know that tonight, that probably needs to be addressed so that in this 2 week period, an application doesn't come in with all of the setback being asphalt. That's all I would indicate.
So let me ask this real quick to try to move this along. Does the council feel comfortable putting the definition on the cross sections? Is that where we want the definition to be of what we want on that setback area? Is that the location?
Fine with me.
I think it's a good
Okay.
choice.
Okay, so if that's the case, that's on the whole, that's the next item to come up with, right? However, I do think that in the current code, we still need to stipulate and clarify where those setbacks are, as David had referenced, and things of that nature. So I would leave the motion as stands, that we can come back and clarify that verbiage and everything in 2 weeks, and then we can further clarify not asphalt on the next one, and then we can make the changes to define further what hardscape is in 2 weeks as well.
Mr. Mayor, could I just chip in real quick one thing, if I may? The clarification as to where the setbacks are, I really believe, and I probably need to try to find it here real quick, I really believe that's already in there. We just need to find it, and if you're concerned that it's not clear enough, we could do that, but I'm certain that, I know we talked with Mike Hathorn, and David, maybe you can help me out, if you remember that discussion that we had with Mike where we added that in, where it said where those setbacks are. And if, again, if the only issue though about what goes in it is just to define hardscape as concrete, or if you want to say concrete and pavers, I don't think we need 2 weeks to do that. I would say you tell us tonight and we'll change it and make sure it's very clear what it says. Whether it's on the next agenda item. Yes, I'm sorry. On the next, correct, on the next agenda item. Sorry.
Well, I'm good with it, but I still think the motion stands because there's still things outside of this current code that David just pointed out where it just references 200 South and it doesn't reference the other corridor that we have.
Well, I know it does, I just gotta find it. So,
Well, it says in one place and not another place.
Oh, it does reference that.
I'm sure we put it in there, David, and I'm sorry,
I think it's in the 3.044. That's where it references.
where we
the
said if
setback.
you have a lot that is adjacent to one of the master plan roads, you have to have a setback that complies with the cross-section. I'm paraphrasing.
We're not talking about those setbacks at all. I think we're only talking about, I think Councilmember Shelton's only talking about the ones that are on the roads.
That's all I'm talking about too.
And so with that, if we modify section 3.044 to include the other thoroughfares, it covers every road that would have a setback that's different than anywhere else in the TOD, because it's only the thoroughfare roads that have that setback requirement. So 200 South and the thoroughfare roads, those are the only two cases where we would have a different setback. So I think it's simple to add the language in section 3.044 to include 200 South and any thoroughfare roads in the master plan. That takes care of that setback issue. Now, it doesn't talk about the hardscape right there, but that would be the next agenda item where we would identify what hardscape is and give some clarity to that.
I'm good with that.
So I have a motion and I have a second on that motion. Is there, would you be amendable? Are you set on your motion, Councilman Shelton? Do you want to make?
I'm all about moving forward on it, but my biggest worry is how long have we discussed it here with all of us, and we're all confused on, does it say it, does it not say it, where does it say that? Now I know we're coming in, and hopefully over time we'll become very familiar with this and we can point right to it, but if we're going to approve something, I just want to make sure we actually have it there, because I hope that when this final approval goes, I can take and shred all this stuff and not even worry about it anymore. It's not going to take up any more of my brain space. So I'd like to come up with something that's simple, people can easily go to and read, and there's not going to be confusion. If that's going to require staff and our consultant to go back and do what was asked in the work session to make sure that's clear in there, let's take the extra 2 weeks to do it. But if the rest of the council feels comfortable that that one change is going to address it through the whole rest of the document, I'm okay with that. I mean, you've got, how big is this document? 100 and some odd pages, right? So if we feel like we've got it everywhere, and there's no need to cross our T's and dot our I's, go ahead and pass it then.
Well, it's your motion on the table.
I leave it as stands, but it's open to whatever anyone else wants to do.
One second. Councilman Tater?
Yeah, no, we're ready for a question on the motion. I'm good. I hate to fall into, I'm just of a different mindset. I believe that we can come to the changes that we need to come to. Perhaps that's a little altruistic, but that's where I am. I believe we can get the clarity that we need in this. And, you know, the form-based, it's a different animal. So I do understand where everyone's coming from with this, but I believe that we can we can come to a point. I wasn't in favor of the different surfaces inside of that 4-foot setback anyway. So, I mean, it's easy for me. Hard surface, you could say concrete, and I'd say go. So, I mean, the motion and the second is out there, so we just need to vote.
So I want to just clarify something through our legal then, and through your motion then. So as we have a motion and a second, does that motion approve? Are we going to be able to remove this moratorium based upon what's been said in your mind, Councilman Shelton? Or is this coming back in 2 weeks?
Well, I still think that's up on item 6, but in my mind, as one council member, it would remove my issues of having a moratorium, that we're close enough to remove that moratorium when we would need it again. But I'm just one council
On
member.
your motion tonight, right now, that you've made.
Correct.
Right.
So we get to item 6, I'm all happy about lifting it, but I'm only, we still have to vote on that. I don't know if anyone else has any reservations on that.
Did the motion include a definition of hardscape in the code? Can't remember.
It did not. My suggestion at this point would be that we would have a restatement of the motion so that we're all on the same page moving forward. There needs to be, if we're not, I know, I'm sorry.
Isn't there like a court
But-
reporter that reads back or something like that?
The concern that I would have is to make sure that the motion is in fact approving the code as is, with the understanding that staff has been directed to make the change on the zone clearance officer on, I believe it was page 7, and that staff has been directed to further clarify who each of, who has the approval authority for those specific issues, whether it's the building department, or I'm sorry, the planning department or public works director. The council's giving the authority to Adam and Scott to work that out for those changes to then be ratified at the next meeting. Until that time, it is an and/or. And that's what's being approved tonight, with the understanding that they will come back in 2 weeks to ratify any further changes on that. That was my understanding of the motion. And then we also had the setback issue, but I believe it's kind of been worked out that that's going to be addressed in the next item. Is that?
I believe what we said is that we still need to address, sort of like Scott pointed out, there's what goes in that 4 feet, and then make sure everyone knows that that 4 feet exists. And so that would be still part of the motion, is that part of this, staff's going to go back through the whole document, and wherever it needs to make sure it references that extra 4 feet or 8 feet, that they bring those recommendations back to us to make those changes.
The question I would have on that is, are we approving the code as is with direction to staff to come back with changes in 2 weeks? Or are you making those changes today for those to be put into effect? And it doesn't sound like that's the case. So really what the motion is approving the code as it is, with the exception of the zone clearance officer change, because that's one that's very clearly made, and then direction to staff to come back in 2 weeks with those further requested changes. That's the way that the motion, that's the only way to move forward and lift the moratorium without being concerned about vesting rights in the next 2 weeks.
Well, I think at this stage, Adam and Scott could handle things where it is the way it's written now, and then we could clarify it for the future. There's not going to be any question for the next 2 weeks between those two, who does what.
And then we talked about having staff, not zone clearance officer. We talked about having staff for the definition that you had, as corrected or as specified.
And that's what I love about it, is we're not telling the staff this is what has to be in the code. It's you come back with the recommendations, and then we will say, yes, put that verbiage there or not, right? And we'll make the necessary changes.
So would it be appropriate to have that motion that was made about 3 hours ago, give or take, reread so that we all at least have it somewhat fresh in our minds? Or is everybody comfortable with what they remember they thought they heard?
I'd actually,
No, I think the motion's changed, because the first motion we had, the comment about hard surface and designating, what that setback would be. We don't need that in this.
I'll withdraw my motion, I'll make a new motion.
I
How's
was going to
that?
actually make an
All
alternate
right.
motion. So do you want to go first?
I'll see what I can try to come up with.
That works with me.
So I'm going to move that we approve the, where am I at here? Ordinance repealing, replacing section 174608, got it right that time, of the American Fork City Development Code regarding transit-oriented developments of the American Fork City Development Code, and direct staff to come back in 2 weeks and to be able to address where it specifies planning director and public works director, specifically who's going to be responsible for those items, and specifically defining in the document where it refers to the 4 foot and 8 foot setbacks for developers to refer to.
Okay. All right. We have a motion.
I'll second that one.
So and do I need to put 2 weeks in there? Did I put 2 weeks in there? Okay, thank you.
The only thing I had was the and/or, just to make sure the and/or thing was in there, but I think it was kind of understood, so I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Shelton and a second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion?
I have the same comment. I just would prefer verbiage that is like already added in for 200 South. I would just prefer that it had the verbiage for the major thoroughfares instead of.
So if you'd like to add that tonight, I have no problem amending my
But
motion
instead of
to include
what,
that.
What you said, which was to add verbiage about having 4-foot setbacks, which.
I asked for staff to bring back recommendations. I didn't say that had to be that verbiage.
Okay.
So if you want, tonight, we can add in.
Well, that's why I'm just not smart enough to do like the, like I have to have it written so I can see what it is. I'm like, what are we doing again?
Well, that's the key of having this come back, is that we're going to have time to have it written, to look at it, and to be able to say, is that exactly what we wanted to have, versus tonight trying to come up with something, and then we end up, and unfortunately, you could use a lot of examples where we approved something and later it came back to be something we didn't ever think was going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not accurate. I mean, that's a stretch. Don't you mean, honestly, with the items we need clarity on, don't you think that's a big stretch?
Well, I just think because you're looking at the setback area, and just as ugly as we've had some other facades, someone can come back and say, boy, that sure is ugly. The way that didn't look congruent, or you've got different things along the way. So maybe it is, I don't know, but that's what I expect.
We want to address that in the next agenda item?
Perhaps, yes. I'm just going off of what it is now.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. And any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Chris Jansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We will now turn to item number 4 on our agenda, and it's a review and action on, and we're going to change the verbiage there on an ordinance approving amendments to the Transportation Master Plan, including street cross sections with the TOD zone, pressurized irrigation master plan, sanitary sewer master plan, and culinary water master plan. Sherilyn, can you just maybe give us just a synopsis on why we are calling this an ordinance as opposed to a resolution?
One day I'm going to learn how to turn this on. In reviewing the agenda for today, there was some concern from legal. Just the state code talks about when a resolution is appropriate versus when an ordinance is appropriate. It's not determinative, but from a legal perspective, we would feel more comfortable with this being passed as a ordinance as opposed to a resolution. It was noticed up as a resolution, but we don't have a concern about that because the content of it is not changing. It's simply being passed as an ordinance as opposed to a resolution. So there's no legal concern there. It's just the safer way to go about this approval.
Okay. All right, council, any questions for our staff concerning this item?
We need to define hardscape
Yes, I think we're going to have to define hardscape,
or just put in concrete.
or specific surfaces that are hardscape. Concrete?
That's where I'm going.
Does the council want to include anything decorative like a paver?
I think we could do stamped concrete. I think we could do colored concrete. I think we could do regular concrete. I think that's the hard surface we're looking for.
So we just let them choose which kind of concrete?
Yeah.
Just put in concrete?
Just not permeable, right?
Not permeable concrete?
I feel like when Bubba and Forrest Gump is talking about all the things you can do with shrimp. You got your concrete stuff, you got your concrete celery. Someone tell me why concrete's not the best idea for that.
You're saying you would exclude pavers totally?
I would exclude pavers.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm not arguing.
No.
And to me, concrete's concrete. I don't get as technical sometimes as some of the rest of you. Whether you color it blue or purple or stamp it or sign your initials in it, it's still concrete to me.
The only reservation I might have, and I'll just voice that, and for what it's worth, is just having it textured. Now you can stamp it, and it can be a smooth surface, but if you can get a pretty aggressive texture, and you're talking on an 8-foot setback, it's going to be part of where people will be walking, maybe strolling their kids, and it could be kind of a bumpy surface. Not to keep making references to Walmart and Cedar Hills. But,
David, you got a disclosure on that one, don't you?
but-
Keep telling us.
Sometimes you come home there and you just decide you're just going to have scrambled eggs instead of fried eggs. So, but that's just an idea, council. Do we want it to be smooth, whatever it might be? You can color it, but do we want it smooth, or do we want to just say any kind of concrete? There's
Smooth
not
surface stamped and colored concrete. Stamped and colored.
And
Okay.
could we put just smooth concrete and stamped as approved by staff, or is that too arbitrary to be able to say where that's at?
No, I think we go. I think if we're going to specify hard surface, or we say hard surface A, or however we designate this, and if we go my way, if I'm king for a day, we have concrete and we have it in a couple of varieties, and that's it.
We could just say concrete, plain, or decorative, but smooth.
Sure.
That gives them options.
Sure. That's where I would go, but.
And I would just take out the word hardscape altogether.
Yeah, no, that's why I say come up with hard surface B, whatever it is. Because the hard surface is already defined. Come on, Stacy. I think in your mind.
That's what I'm saying. It's not hard surface. It's concrete only.
Material B, material A, whatever it is. Whatever word you choose, I don't think it matters as long as that word's consistent, right? We don't have hardscape in our other ordinance that we're referring back to, so there's no issue.
Okay. Well, keep that in the back of your mind, and now let's talk, is there any other questions that the council has for staff in regards to the other items on this action?
The only thing that I had thought of, and it's very small, it's nothing to do with tonight, but I want to bring it up, is I really appreciated the water tour that we had a chance to go on. And it was very educational to be able to take a look at that and see where our water sources inside the city are. I think, and maybe my memory's wrong, David, but I think we talked about the Springline project, and that was not included in our impact fee analysis. Is that right?
So it's an existing line, and the line itself has capacity for it. And so we're not really upsizing for development per se. So we would have to look at that and see if it qualifies, because only certain projects can qualify for impact fees. It's just not every project.
And that's the only thing I would say is let's take a look at that and see. I think the last time Kevin and I were trying to look at the data up here on the document, I think it's 2016 is the last time we approved the water impact fee analysis. Does that sound about right? So maybe this year as we're looking at that spring line, seeing if it does qualify. The water projects we do have on our docket are significant in expense, and we want to make it fair to the homeowners that are coming to our city. And fair is a very difficult thing to come to at times, But I would like to at least look at that to make sure, that's a major, I mean, that's probably 50% of our city's water. We're gonna upsize that line to get extra capacity to provide more water to the city for the future growth, because going right to the upper tanks, you got a 36-inch water line going all the way down to the TOD. I think there might be some argument there, but have the experts at least look at it. So that's the only thing I'd have. Let's take a look at that and see if that spring line qualifies for any type of impact fee analysis.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'm wanting to make a motion. I'm gonna go. I move to adopt the ordinance approving the general plan amendments and to approve the TOD cross sections with the changing hardscape to concrete. Non-permeable, non-stamped.
I would just say smooth.
Okay, smooth surface concrete.
Would you be willing to accept an amendment to that motion? That we add that Clark can be king for the day?
I already have it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, already. You have that wish, I just want to make sure we can have it come true tonight.
And I'm willing to forfeit my crown if anyone can tell me why we should have anything with concrete.
I'm happy to put that on the next council agenda.
I just know I got heartache for a wordy motion, but boy, that sure was kind of wordy.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
And a motion by Councilmember Carroll, seconded by Councilmember Taylor. And a little bit of discussion. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, item number 6 is a review and action on lifting the temporary land use regulation prohibiting development within the TOD zone. I think this could be a very quick motion.
Mayor, I move to approve the temporary land use regulation prohibiting development with TOD zone.
I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 7 is review and action on an ordinance amending section 17.2.402 of the American Fork City Code relating to the duties of the zone clearance officer. Any questions on this?
If I could ask the question, what's the purpose of it?
So this was, talking with Tim, the thought was that the city planner it's not identified anywhere in the TOD code that he would be the zoning clearance officer. And so by adding it here, then we specifically designate the planner as a zone clearance officer. It's not identified anywhere else in that code.
So I guess as I take a look at it, section 17.2401 states that it is the director of planning department is hereby designated the zone clearance officer.
So this is where it's involving the interpretation and application of the code. So for the TOD. So if there's an interpretation in the TOD code, that's where the city planner, as the zoning clearance officer, would be the person who interprets the code.
But I guess, how is that different than what is currently written, like for any other code? I'm wondering, why do we have to have a special TOD? I'm okay approving it, it's the exact same whether we have it in there or not, but we don't have in there that we specify every zone, there's a zone clearance officer for interpretation. It's the hierarchy that has it, right?
My understanding of this is that the TOD is going to bring upon new challenges and interpretations that we've never had to deal with. We have a different type of code coming forward with the TOD. There's going to be a little bit more room for interpretation. And really this goes to just kind of clarify that it is our zone clearance officer, that being the planning director, that is going to have final say in those decisions when there is some of that ambiguity. You're right that other residential zones or other zones in the city don't necessarily have a direction as to who interprets that.
Well, I think they do. It's 172402 and it says the zone clearance officer.
The concern here is just that the TOD just brings on such a different dynamic than we've seen in the city. And it's really just trying to add a little bit more clarification. And if it's doubling up, it may be doubling up a little bit, but the concern was just making sure there's clarity as to who's making that call.
I guess the only thing is kind of going back to, keep throwing Scott under the bus here, but, have it written one place and that's good enough, so we don't have to keep worrying about it where it's everywhere else. But I don't know why we have to specify one zone is treated any different, and it's not being treated any different, because again, 172402 clearly defines exactly what item 6 is, so I'm just not sure the reason for it. Again, I don't have any heartburn passing, other than, again, if we're trying to keep simplicity of the code and not have things written all over the place, I'm not sure the need for it, but.
Well, if you don't have any heartburn passing it, I'm open to a motion.
I think I agree with Councilmember Shelton. If it's redundant, we don't need to have it.
If we can go into that government, what do they call it? Paper Reduction Act that had to say how many pages everything was in the federal government, had to try to reduce it. Maybe this is one where we get 2 lines out of the code. I don't know.
I'm just going to want a good legal, I mean, again, is this just insurance policy? Is this just, Sherilyn, or are you probably texting Tim?
I am.
Yeah, it's, from what Tim has suggested, it's a little different in this code, in the TOD code, versus any other zone in the city. And so maybe he can shed some light real quick.
Well, can we change it? I mean, what if the city planner is designated zone clearance officer, which already is designated in the section right above it that states clearly that, so I don't know why we have to redo that, and then just state for matters involving interpretation of the city and application of the city's development code?
Including transit-oriented,
I don't know
if
if
we
that did-
want to.
I don't know why you have to specify any.
Yeah.
Mayor, I might be losing it. Mayor, what if we tabled this and came back to it so that we could go on to the other items
Okay,
while we got advice from Tim?
I'm good with that. We'll just move on. And let's go to item number 6, or 8, excuse me, review and action on an ordinance approving the 7750 North annexation consisting of 18.032 acres at 900 West, 200 South, including the ordinance of annexation agreement, and the placement of the property in the trans-oriented development zone. This is the long-awaited parcel of the Utah LLC. We've been talking
Mayor, I'd
about.
move to approve the 7750 North annexation consisting of 18.032 acres at 900 West, 200 South, including the ordinance of annexation agreement, and placement of the property in the TOD zone.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Taylor,
I'll second
Sec-
that.
seconded by Councilmember Carroll. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Item number 9 is review and action on a performance in lieu agreement with Woodside Homes of Utah LLC regarding actual construction in lieu of providing an improvement construction guarantee associated with the Stone Creek Plat B. We're seeing more and more of these
Yeah.
along the way. So,
Mayor, I move to approve the performance in lieu agreement with Woodside Homes of Utah for Stone Creek Plat B and authorize the mayor to execute the documents.
Second?
we have a motion by Councilmember Carroll and a second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion?
Just make sure it says staff recommends it. Is that everybody in staff? Is that the various departments, I should say? Is,
Councilman Barnes, it's really the Public Works Engineering.
is it just Public Works and you're okay with it?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes, Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Tater.
Aye.
Item number 10 is a review and action on awarding of the design engineering contract for the East State Street Utility Project. Scott, if you'd come forward, just give us a synopsis on this.
Certainly.
This is our State Street project.
Mr. Mayor, this item is regarding, UDOT is in the design stages right now of doing a significant widening project of State Street, East State Street, between roughly 500 East and the city limit border with Pleasant Grove. The project actually goes beyond that into Pleasant Grove, but the part that we're concerned, excuse me, is the part I just described there. They're looking at probably bidding that sometime in the spring and at least by the fall, thereabouts, trying to be under construction with that widening project. So we really wanted to make sure that while we had the opportunity, we went out and replaced some of the aging and aged water infrastructure, water and PI infrastructure. Excuse me, sorry, I'm losing my voice. But this would approve us to be able to contract with the engineering company and get that design work done. This is with Avenue Consultants. They are the engineer who UDOT has hired to do the design. We felt it was in the best interest of the city to contract directly with them since they've got all the survey data, they've got all the background on the project, and to be able to have them provide these plans for us that we would then later take out to bid, do as on our own as our own separate project, get in and out before UDOT gets started. So this is to award the design. Excuse me.
We will pay for that.
Yes, correct. It won't be a betterment agreement. It'll be just the, I've got some right there. Actually, mine's even stronger. So, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to say that. Yeah.
So that's part of it, we're paying for this part of it.
Correct. We would pay for this separate with city funds, pay for the construction separate with city funds, and not really have any thing to do with the UDOT. Correct. I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Are we going to be all the way through before they?
We're going to be in and out before they're through. And so we'll coordinate closely with them and see if there are some places where maybe we can save a little bit on pavement, but a lot of the work is just kind of getting out of their way, really. That's the get in, get out before they get started.
Only question I have on that is we had the presentation on that, right? I think there were quite a few questions, and then I think there was another meeting that was going to happen. I have no problem moving forward with this, but there's maybe some update that could be provided from staff on what that's going to be.
Right.
What I'm concerned I have, Vendolin, is that trail system that's supposed to be in there. I just don't know how you're ever going to squeeze that in all the way through the city. I was looking at some of the standards, say that you need 20 feet between the rail line and the trail. So I think that's just very important. The plan is there, and now it's kind of coming actually to fruition, right? And how do we coordinate that, and do we need to adjust our plan? So any report back from staff on that would be great.
Very good.
With that, Mayor, I'll move to approve the East State Street Utility Improvement Project Engineering Services Contract as presented.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Shelton, a second by Councilmember Christiansen. Any discussion on the motion?
Could we maybe have Mr. Sensenbauer go over the hard surface that will be placed on top of those?
Permeable.
I'm just kidding. No,
I just
don't
like
even-
my idea for the hard surface was handprints like Grauman's Chinese Theater. That's what,
That'd be nice.
that's what we need. Yeah.
Okay, I will call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen.
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton.
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Tater.
Aye.
All right, item number 11 is review and action on awarding of the design engineering contract for the city's 36-inch water line project, something we discussed in our last work session. So, any questions for Scott?
I think my questions were brought up in that meeting, but just to reiterate, as far as right-of-way acquisition, everything like that's going to be part of this engineering that's going to come back, and we'll see what that looks like at that point in time. So,
Correct.
I feel comfortable moving forward with it. So if there's no heartburn, I'll move to approve the 36-inch water line design project as presented and authorize the city administrator to enter into a contract with Horrocks Engineers in the amount of $260,000.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Shelton,
Second.
second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen,
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton,
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes,
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
All right, item number 12. I'm going to, Sherilyn, if there's anything else that's been brought to light on item number 7 that you would like to bring up, we can go back to that. Okay, let's go to item number 7.
So in reviewing the code as it sits now, in 17.2.402, the powers and duties of the zone clearance officer, there's nothing in that section that gives the zone clearance officer the authority to interpret the code. If there's disputes or disagreements on that, it would go to the Board of Adjustment as it currently sits. Because the TOD is going to bring about likely some additional issues of interpretation, that was the purpose of including the city planner being designated as the zone clearance officer for the purposes of interpretation and application of the TOD code. The other, to simplify it, if we wanted it to go across the board, we certainly could modify that so that the city planner or the zone clearance officer interprets all, or has the ability to interpret any zones within the city. As it sits right now, though, that is not a duty of the zone clearance officer. And so we were just looking to add clarity so we didn't have to go to the Board of Adjustment every time there was a dispute in the TOD code.
I appreciate that clarification because I thought it was handled in section 2 of that. So where it just uses the word determine whether what use is set forth. But if that isn't clear enough and it goes to the Board of Adjustments, I thought that we had talked about that in a work session, and I thought the council was in agreement to leave it at the Board of Adjustments and provide sufficient training to the board on a regular basis. I have a big concern about, again, treating this one area so different than any other. If we trust them with the interpretation of our code, let's make it across the board and get them the training they need. I like that, especially with my experience on the board, because then you have 5 individuals and you have an opportunity for both sides to present their case to an independent board that has the chance to review that. If I was someone that wanted interpretation, I'd prefer to go to a board than versus one individual. I know some cities have replaced their whole Board of Adjustments with just one person. I think that's a gross error, and maybe that's just my upbringing of 9 years being part of that, because, boy, there's some great valuable people that are on that board, and I think we're selling them short to not let them do it for the whole code.
Do they do interpretations for the other part of the code?
Mm-hmm. You know, in Fred England's one we're looking at right now that we had to handle, and I'm so glad that that was done at the Board of Adjustments level and not done at the staff level, because there was, and Mayor Frost knows the history as I've given it to him, you know, we had the mayor showing up demanding interpretation one way, and the great thing is the board is completely independent, and there's no undue influence of someone's job or anything of that nature, and we could tell the mayor, sorry, we interpret it a different way as it's written and presented.
So you're saying I can't be king for a day?
No, I didn't mean to. I'm not trying to point you out there, Mayor. There are other mayors that had tried to take that position because it was their best friend that had the issue with the interpretation, and so they were trying to get the mayor to interpret it one way. Reason for having that independent board review it.
Okay, we have one opinion. What's the rest of the council feel about this? Again, I do think that there's merit in the fact that this has got complexity to it, that you know, it takes time to digest it. Took the planning commission how many hours just in deliberation, making changes, the reading of the documentation. So, where's the council want to go?
I'm thinking of the old adage that you treat all your children the same, and I'm kind of leaning towards the simplicity that it should be the same as every other child, and it should be the same process. I haven't totally made up my mind, but I'm leaning that way for the simplicity, and everybody knows it's always the same way, so that it doesn't look like there's favoritism for a certain section or a certain group or something else. But I also, on the other side, understand this TOD is a whole different thing. And that's where the conflict comes in my mind as to how you really do this. Are we going to make everything in the TOD, and that's an exaggeration, and I understand that, but are we going to make everything in the TOD subject to its own little kingdom, not for just today, but for eternity? Because they're always going to have something different because they're the TOD. That's kind of the concern I have.
The truth of the matter is, even though we say we should treat all of our children the same, we never do. You never do. It's based on circumstance, and I don't feel like I'm jerking this out of the hands of a very capable board and the Board of Adjustments, but I hope I'm providing some type of efficiency, because not everything needs to go there.
Well, let's be honest, there's a determination that's made at the staff level, first of all, right? So if they put in an application and it's Adam that has to make that, and Adam says, no, I interpret the code to be this way, that's when they're going to go to the Board of Adjustments, because you can say, I'm not going to approve this to happen. So you already have that initial interpretation coming from staff. What we're adding is an independent appeal authority that doesn't have any other influence. And once they make their decision, it only goes to the 4th District Court. So you can't, I like the independence of that. I like the ability to say, no, there's a balance of power there. And I think we lose that balance of power by giving it right back to what other cities have done with one individual.
And the intent of this is not to take away the powers of the Board of Adjustment at all. In fact, they are the appeal authority, and they would continue to be the appeal authority. What this is saying is, hey, as far as matters of interpreting the TOD code and what it really means, it will be the zoning clearance officer. Now, if they don't agree with that, or they want a variance, or they want to appeal, then they would still go to the Board of Adjustment.
But doesn't that happen how it is already, though? So
I don't think that it's clear in the code right now on the zone clearance officer. Now what you're saying is, does staff make some determinations, and do they already interpret to some level?
And I think that's contained in the Board of Adjustment section, where it talks about any administrative official, they have the right to appeal to the Board of Adjustments. I just think, again, keep it the same all the way across every zone. If Adam comes in, or whoever is Adam's successor after Adam has a long career here of 30 years and retires, then, you know, it goes right back to the board. I don't think we lose any efficiencies of it, and I'd rather have that protection of independence in a quasi-judicial board set up versus someone that is under the payroll and influence. And I'm not saying that that would happen under this current administration. I really don't want that to be there, but it has happened again in the past.
Whether or not it has happened, the point is that it could happen.
That's what makes our, and I don't want to exaggerate further, but quite honestly, that is how our federal government's set up.
So you're suggesting that Adam or the zoning clearance officer right now already will do all of the interpretation of every code without any clarification on his position?
Well, when would someone appeal to the board? When would they ask for interpretations? Where do they first go to?
Well, it's a variance. It would be the Board of Adjustment would look at. They look at appeals to a code.
And they also look at the interpretation. So that's in state code, in that section that's referenced there above. So you got to go back to the state code to look at those powers that are broadly granted there inside that first paragraph.
Yep.
Anyway, so here's what has happened in the past, whether it be Ron Morrill, or it's been Adam, or it's been whoever. They make an interpretation. They make a judgment call, right? And someone says, I don't agree with that. Who do I go to? It's the Board of Adjustments. That's how it's always operated in the city. I just see this muddying the waters.
The one difference with the TOD versus the other codes that we have is that this TOD code adopts kind of, it's a whole new process that we don't have anywhere else in the city in terms of, and I'm going to butcher all of the different.
You got the block plans,
you have
the
your
lot
block
plans, all
and
that
your,
type of
yeah,
stuff.
and,
Right.
and I think that's really what this was intended for, was who is going to tell us, you know, what this means. Who do we go to get clarification on this? And if council feels like that's already going to be done through Adam, then I think Councilman Shelton, you're absolutely right. It's already established that that's the way it is. But if we go back to that thought process of where in the code does it say that, the code doesn't say that. And so that's really what this is doing, is putting in the code that process, that idea, so developers understand that if they need clarification, if they need interpretation, Adam's the person to go talk to. The zone clearance person is who they go talk to. And then if they don't agree with that, or if they can't move forward with their application because of his interpretation, then they get to go to the Board of Adjustment. Again, it is treating the TOD differently than some of our other zones, but the TOD is a very unique child. The TOD has a lot more complications than other zones have, and a lot more room and need for interpretation, honestly.
Isn't this covered under the things that we've been talking about with having them split who's going to do or who's going to do or the things that they would both be approving? Doesn't that cover the same thing?
As a general rule, yes. I think this is more of a protection for where it doesn't specify, because it's not going to be specified. As much as we've tried, it's not going to be specified in every case who that decision maker is.
I'm looking at the state code, and I don't see anywhere in there that it talks about the appeal authority having interpretation power.
I'll bring
Now,
it
it
back
doesn't.
to section 109A703 through 109A708.
Okay. Let's look at that real quick. In 109A703, appealing a land use authority's decision.
So it would
So
be,
that would be the land use authority would be the planning commission. And this is specific for geologic hazards.
No. So if you look at it, our code just says, and we adopt the state code 703 through 708. That's what paragraph B in our code states. So then I'm looking at it right now. It's somewhere between 703 and 708.
Okay.
You know, council, on this one, I'm just going to ask you to go with your gut on this. I mean, we don't need to get hung up on this.
Or we can table it and get more interpretation from legal.
I mean, our legal's giving us good advice. It's an insurance policy. We're going to spend 20 minutes arguing about it.
But I think it's a huge change in balance of power. It absolutely is.
I disagree, but that's just me, and I don't have a vote. So, is
Well, I'm
anybody?
going to make a motion, and then we can vote it up or down.
Okay.
Whatever you want to do. So I move to adopt the ordinance amending section 17.2.402 of the city code relating to the duties of the zone clearance officer.
Okay, I have a motion on the table.
I'll second it.
I have a second so I have a motion by Councilman Taylor, a second by Councilman Carroll. Any discussion on the motion?
I just think if there's really no place where it actually gives him the ability to interpret the code, that I would like to see that in writing.
All right, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
I feel like we're voting before we have all the information before us per the last comment, but I'll vote nay. I'll tell you this, we continue to whittle down the Board of Adjustments authority, and then we give it back to them. That's been the history in this city. We give it to one person, used to be the city administrator with the fencing ordinance. Didn't work out so great, and he said it's better to have an independent appeal authority. So hope it doesn't come back to us, but I vote no.
Councilmember Barnes,
I'll vote no.
Councilmember Carroll,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye. And
All right.
aye because I don't know how we're taking that power from them. I don't know how we're pulling that power from the Board of Adjustments.
Well,
That's just me.
Sure.
I'm just saying.
I'm just going off of what Sherilyn had said was the interpretation of that. That was the whole question of why. When I first saw this, I had a whole different, the reading of that to me was totally different than the clarification we got from Tim. And if that's the case, I just worry, why muddy the waters? Let's keep it very simple and the same, but we're beating a dead horse, Mayor, sorry.
All right, we'll move on to item number 12, is a review and action on awarding of a construction contract for the Art Dye project, phases 1 and 2. Camden, invite you to come forward. We
Sure.
talked about a few changes today. Camden will give us some overview and maybe some recommendation.
Yeah, we're excited to bring this to you guys. We're excited to get Art Dye started. This is going to be great. We had 3 people bid. Kenny Sang came in the lowest, the responsible. They do great work. We're excited to have them as part of that. We've already been started there. We've done a lot as a city to clear the ground, trees, some other stuff on the fields, including getting rid of the structure. We even let the fire department put a bunch of holes in it before we took it down as part of their training and practice. In addition to this contract award, the other thing we've been doing is taking specific items that we can get at a greater value as a city and separating them out. And so there's things like lighting, shade structures, benches, various items like that that we plan to take at a later time this year to award. The city will be purchasing it, and then Kenny Sink can be installing it. It's just more cost effective to have us do it that way. We did present to you the total base bid for Kenny Sing, which was about $4.2 million in here. However, after talking with engineering, with David, and even with Kenny Sing, while we were in line and we're okay with most of the costs and the items, there was the structure itself, the announcer box structure, that we did have some more questions on. It came in more than double what we were estimating the cost to be. And so I would like to recommend amending the motion just to reduce those costs that they gave out of that 4.2. So we would have you award something lower would be the recommendation, just so that we can take that portion, look at it some more, figure out if it's a materials cost increase or if it's something in the architecture design. Understand what those are, hopefully get it down lower, and then bring that back to you to finish the awarding. We have plenty of time to do that, and we just wanted more time to look at that piece specifically. So
We're going to pull out the piece then, Cam, now of the 4.192 for the, what are we calling that? The scores building,
yeah, I was calling it announcer structure. I don't know if there's a more official name anyone's aware of. Derek, do you know what the
there'll be
name of it?
restrooms there, there'll be.
What? Scorekeeper Tower. So the amount they quoted was $698,620.
It's more than a house.
It was more than half what we were estimating. We felt it was worth looking into further. So the revised award amount would be for everything else, allow them to get started right away. And so the revised amount would be $3,494,195. So it's just reducing that scorekeeper tower. Any other questions regarding this?
I've got one in section 5.03, paragraph A. Just need some help with definitions. The work will be substantially completed on or before July 15th and completed and ready for final payment in accordance with paragraph the general conditions on or before July 30th of 2020. Substantially completed to me means it's pretty well done. I must not understand that word, obviously, if it's going to take another year to get it done. So help me just understand what that paragraph's saying.
Sure. So you're right. Substantially completed means the project is largely completed. What we wanted to do is give ourselves a warranty period for really the grass. We have the phase 2, the soccer fields is going to be seeded, hydro seeded, and we want to make sure we have time to let it come in, fully grow, and make sure it's all there as it should be before we finally cut them loose and say everything's been done. And so.
Kind of like the 10% holdback we do on some of the other things where they have the durability. Is this kind of like that?
Yeah, I would think so.
It doesn't say the 10%, it says the final payment. It doesn't define what the final payment, at least not right there, so.
Right.
Maybe I'm just nitpicking, but I just got confused when I saw that.
Yeah, as I understand it, the real intent of that is just to kind of warranty the hydro seed to make sure it's fully grown. I'm clear of the payment timing and all of that, but we're trying to give ourselves protection so that they don't throw the seed down and we have problems and we've already let them go.
So if I could just jump in here, typically between substantial complete and final completion, and they are two separate things. Substantial means we can actually use the facility for what it's for. However, there probably would be some punch list items to take care of, some cleanup issues, some final things to take care of before they get final approval and final payment. Typically, the time frame between there is a shorter period than a year and 15 days. And it would be probably recommended that that be no more than 60 days from the time of substantial completion to the time of final. I think that July 30th date should be amended to be September 15th of 2019. I don't think we should give the contractor a year and 15 days to get from substantial to final. So
We'll have a whole bunch of new jokes about workers not working on the city clock, right? I mean, if it's going to take a year and they got equipment still down there or whatever it is. So.
And then 7.02 talks about the substantial completion and the payment, the 95% of work completed, and some of the other things. So I think we've addressed that other concern that I had. And yeah,
Okay.
once it's been defined, a year seems like one heck of a long time.
So can you scroll back to that, Midland, to that paragraph where we had the July? And I'm so excited I can barely stand it. So, Mayor, I would move that we accept the bid submitted by Kenny Sane Construction for the construction of the Art Dye Phase 1 and 2 and construction project for $3,494,195 and reserve the remaining $698,620 for further review regarding construction of the Scores Tower, and also to change section 5.03A from July 30th, 2020 to September 30th, 2019. And approve the construction contracted as presented.
Okay. Very lengthy motion, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You go for the record. I'll second it.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Taylor, second by Councilmember Barnes. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Number 13, review and action on awarding a contract for the 2018 CDBG culinary water line replacement project. This is phase 7, as you know. We're really hoping we can get to phase 8. We'll see what happens, but we're blessed to have phase 7 in front of us. Is there any questions on this? This is something with the urban and housing development, and we're receiving about 50% of this. The city's paying about 53% of the money. So,
Mayor, I move that we accept the bid submitted by Noland and Son for the Construction Inc. for the construction of the 2018 CDBG culinary water line replacement project phase 7 in the amount of $540,701 and approve the contract as presented.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Carroll, seconded by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion?
Just real quick, this doesn't go down 4th East to 5th East, right? 'Cause I'm looking at that map, right? Well, the reason I'm asking, there's a sewer gap that we have. I think Aaron and I were looking at it the other day down there by the skate park, but this is all north of the skate park, right?
Here comes Aaron.
Go right ahead.
He's been waiting all night for this.
Councilmember Shelton, yes, this is correct. This picks up just north of there and carries to the east. And so that section where you talked about, it would have to be a later project or a future project of some sort.
As long as we can keep that on our mind, I mean, that's just a little connection that would be great to be able to have inside our city to get those residents. Some really nasty septic tanks in that area, so.
Well, maybe that's for next year's CDB.
Well, I don't want to mix culinary with septic tanks,
No,
but if we're digging up the road, I just thought it'd be good to make that connection.
All right, I have a motion and a second.
A little more discussion. I just feel obligated to present the other point of view that we no longer get because of elections that took place a while ago. We should not be taking money from the federal government to fund things when the federal government's in debt. Some of you are smiling. Some of you are just saying he's totally insane. That's a bit of a joke based on.
To wash that whole section of my life out.
Based on a prior. I just thought we ought to have it. I mean, we've been here all night. What the heck?
Okay. I have a motion and a second and some great commentary, so I'll go for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
A definite aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye. I do too.
Item number 14 is a review and action on an approval of a resolution amending the memorandum of understanding with the Utah County Major Crimes Task Force regarding litigation involving multiple jurisdictions. If anybody needs the chief to come forward.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the resolution amending the memorandum of understanding with Utah County Major Crimes Task Force.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor, seconded by Councilmember Carroll. Any discussion?
I just want,
That approval means the police, right? You're in favor of this?
I just want to know, are we talking specific litigation, or is it just a general thing?
This is based upon a previous incident they had where a couple of agencies got themselves tangled up in a lawsuit and one attempted to settle without consulting the other. So they felt that it would be good to bring an MOU back and say, look, at least let's sit down at the table and have a conversation.
Thanks, Chief. I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Number 15 is a review and action on a resolution approving the declaration of vehicles to be surplus and disposed of.
Mayor, I'd move to approve the resolution declaring vehicles surplus and to be disposed of.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilmember Taylor, second by Councilmember Christiansen.
Just glad to see the Chargers finally leave. That's been a good thing, and we're going back to the Ford. So, right, Chief?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Christiansen?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelton?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
All right, item number 16. Now that we've declared Councilman Taylor king for the day, let's end this.
Send his rain.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mayor.
Seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Christiansen. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Now that we're out, let's make Councilman Taylor king for the day, the second Thursday of next week.
The second Thursday of next week.
Turkey.
I got it, Harvard. That doesn't work.
First Thursday.